To hear the testimony of the President's concerning the President's fiscal year 2026 budget request. I welcome Secretary Hegseth, Chairman Caine, and Acting Comptroller MacDonnell. As we review the past 5 months, the President and the Department of Defense have much to be proud of. The administration has largely succeeded in refocusing the Pentagon on warfighting. Our recruitment numbers have dramatically improved. That is a very important achievement and one we will continue to celebrate. The U.S. military has played a significant supporting role in the President's wholesale success at our southern border. He has achieved operational control over the situation, a position the vast majority of Americans support. In Operation Rough Rider, the President imposed costs on the Houthis. The operation was well executed by our service members, and it appears to have achieved its stated objectives for now. Similarly, the President has relentlessly struck al-Qaeda and ISIS terrorists. Those strikes have helped to open up space for diplomatic breakthroughs in Syria, and they have prevented significant external attacks that could have emanated from Somalia. Unfortunately, the axis of aggressors is resilient. It is hell-bent on challenging American global leadership. It is clearer than ever that Vladimir Putin is uninterested in President Trump's and President Zelensky's offers for real peace negotiations. The Europeans are heeding the President's call to rearm, but we are in a tenuous period. A precipitate withdrawal of U.S. forces from Europe could undo all that progress. In Asia, the Chinese Communist Party continues its campaign of aggression against its neighbors and still displays open ambitions to retake Taiwan. Secretary Hegseth recently made this crucial point in an important speech in Shangri-La. He said, and I quote, "China seeks to become a hegemonic power in Asia," unquote. He is right. China intends to use military force to achieve Xi Jinping's goals. Meanwhile, in the Middle East, the Ayatollah is hiding as his regime crumbles. He is still refusing to negotiate. In short, this is the most dangerous national security moment since World War II. Unconstrained, aggressive dictators are on the move. And importantly, the character of warfare is rapidly changing. That is a dangerous combination. We cannot have an American-led golden age of peace and prosperity if we fail to navigate these historic security challenges. President Trump is actively working to protect American interests against 4 main adversaries: Xi Jinping and his Chinese Communist Party, Vladimir Putin's militarized Russia, Kim Jong-un's North Korea, and the Ayatollah's religious fanatics, including his web of terrorists. Our Commander-in-Chief deserves a military capable of maintaining deterrence and applying force when necessary to protect U.S. interests, as he has done in Yemen. I regret to say that this fiscal year 2026 budget request will not deliver that military. When Secretary Hegseth testified before this committee in his confirmation hearing, he made the correct point that spending less than 3% of GDP on defense would be, and I quote, "very dangerous," unquote. What we have in front of us is an inadequate budget request with precious little detail and no follow-on data about fiscal years 2027, 2028, or 2029. We must assume, and in fact, we have heard, that OMB intends to maintain defense spending at $893 billion across the 4 years of this administration. So even with a one-time $150 billion reconciliation infusion, this would leave us at 2.65% of GDP by 2029, below 3% of GDP and well below the 5% of GDP that we really, really need. Clearly, such a budget plan would allow the military balance to continue, as it has been, to tilt away from the United States and toward Communist China. Communist China has increased its budget by over 7% each year for the past decade. I know the Secretary fought for a stronger fiscal year 2026 discretionary request, but we need to acknowledge that a flat fiscal year 2026 budget is what OMB delivered. I expect we will spend today reviewing the numerous significant holes in this request, gaps that will make it much more difficult for President Trump to equip our service members and for his advisors to develop credible military options. Across the budget, we see significant holes: shipbuilding, tactical fighters, basic maintenance money, and more, all insufficient. The budget seems to be written as if there are many items in the reconciliation package that simply are not in that bill. This is confusing because the text of the reconciliation bill has been public for quite some time. Chairman Rogers of the House and I worked closely with the executive branch and members of this committee on the contents of the package. This budget threatens to undermine the good work we have done together on that bill and leads me to question whether some officials in the administration plan to ignore congressional intent. I believe ignoring congressional intent would be a wrong-headed decision for the United States of America. We all work for the American people, and we share largely identical goals when it comes to deterring Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and other threats. We need to work much more closely together on investment strategies and actions necessary to rebuild our industrial base. The President and the Congress want action on reindustrialization. We want to rebuild the arsenal of democracy. We need action on industrial base integration, streamlined weapon sales, and cooperation with our allies and partners. We agree on fundamentally changing the way the DOD budgets and handles acquisition. Now we need to agree on providing the men and women of the Department of Defense with the resources they need to do their jobs. We have no time to waste. We must commit to continued collaboration now. With that, I turn to my friend and colleague, Senator Reid, for his remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, General Caine, Ms. McDougall, welcome. Mr. Secretary, as the Chairman has said, this is a dangerous moment. As we speak, missiles are striking cities across Israel and Iran, threatening to ignite a regional war. There should be no doubt that for the safety of the United States and the rest of the world, Iran cannot acquire a nuclear weapon. However, Prime Minister Netanyahu's decision to preemptively launch a war with Iran against the urging of the President threatens the stability of the entire region and the safety of Americans stationed there. The Trump administration must take urgent steps to prevent a wider war. Mr. Secretary, I would ask you to be crystal clear this morning about the administration's posture toward Iran. More broadly, Russia continues its bloody assault on Ukraine, unmoved by President Trump's negotiating tactics, and China is threatening our allies in the Indo-Pacific as America once again redirects its attention to the Middle East. This is a moment that requires leadership, expertise, and competence from the Department of Defense. And Mr. Secretary, I am concerned, frankly, that these qualities have been eroded under your leadership. In your opening statement, you write, quote, "At the Department of Defense, we are sweeping away distractions to focus on our core mission of warfighting," close quote. I'm a bit skeptical. Since you were sworn in, much of the Pentagon has been in disarray. You have purged thousands of defense experts, gutted oversight offices, and surrounded yourself with hand-picked loyalists. You have fired a number of our most accomplished generals and admirals with no explanation, no replacement. Your chief of staff, several top policy advisors, and chief spokesmen have all either resigned or been fired. This is a legitimate problem for our national defense. Much of the Pentagon seems to have been paralyzed by infighting and stripped of expert staff at a time when we need stability and professionalism. Mr. Secretary, You must address this so the rest of the department can be laser-focused on their missions. I'm also concerned about your forays into diplomacy. The Secretary must be a capable statesman, especially in this dangerous global environment. During your first official trip to Europe, you made unfortunate mistakes, including by accidentally conceding America's negotiating leverage to Russia when you announced, quote, we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's 2014 borders is an unrealistic objective, and, quote, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. The State Department walked back your comments, but I worry that they cost us lasting credibility during peace negotiations and with our European allies. And, Mr. Secretary, I hope you've learned from these episodes. The key to our long-run success against China, Russia, and Iran and others depend on our ability to equip our forces with the ships, aircraft, and weapons needed to effectively deter them or, if necessary, defeat them. Mr. Secretary, you have said that readiness is your top priority, but I'm concerned by a number of actions you have taken that seem to distract from readiness. For example, you're in the process of firing 8% of the defense workforce, or 75,000 employees, and you recently gutted the Office of the Director of Operational Tests and Evaluation, which is responsible for testing new weapons and platforms for warfighters. You have argued that these cuts were needed to eliminate wasteful spending, but you have simultaneously pledged hundreds of millions of dollars to convert a second-hand Qatari jet to be Air Force One. These decisions do not seem to align with readiness. Similarly, over the past 2 weeks, you have ordered 4,700 National Guard troops and Marines into Los Angeles against the will of the governor and mayor. These forces are in addition to the 13,000 troops you have deployed to the southern border, and separate from the 20,000 National Guard troops requested by DHS to help ICE conduct, quote, interior immigration efforts. As a consequence, military units have to cancel their national training center rotations and waste invaluable hours and resources performing DHS activities unrelated to their warfighting missions. I cannot imagine a faster way to erode military readiness and distract from our ability to deter China, Russia, and Iran. You also claim that merit is the only measure of performance under your leadership. That is a worthy principle. However, you refuse to explain you fired many of our most senior military officers, including the Chief of Naval Operations and the Commander of Cyber Command. All of these positions remain unfilled, which weakens our military. As importantly, these officers were fired without any justification, indeed without considering merit, which creates the worst possible outcome for a military force. Fear throughout the ranks that one should not speak up, should not refuse an illegal order, and should not call out abuse nor question decisions. I fear that last week's disturbing display of partisanship at President Trump's event at Fort Bragg is an example of this. Mr. Secretary, I hope you understand the grave risks of politicizing the military and that you will commit to preventing it. Finally, you have pledged to be transparent as Secretary of Defense, yet to date you have not held a single press conference at the Pentagon. Instead, you have evicted news outlets from the building, overwhelmingly restricted press access, and searched for leaks within your own staff, even threatening general officers with polygraph tests. This is not transparency, and it is a disservice to the American people who deserve to know what their military is doing. Ultimately, Mr. Secretary, this is a dangerous moment, and you must better demonstrate leadership, expertise, and competence atop the Pentagon. You are the 9th Secretary of Defense I have overseen as a member of this committee. In fact, this is the 26th time I have questioned the Secretary of Defense during their annual posture hearing. I have disagreed with each and every one of them on issues of policy and strategy, some more frequently than others, but I've always been able to work with them openly and earnestly because we shared a common agreement that our national defense supersedes partisanship. It's disappointing so far that we have not been able to establish such a relationship with this committee and with your department. Your candid and honest testimony today can go a long way toward making that possible, and I hope we can make that progress. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reed. At this point, we'll ask our witnesses to summarize their testimony in 5 minutes or shorter. We begin with Secretary Hegseth. Sir, welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee, we appreciate the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 26 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify alongside General Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and Bryn McDonnell, who's performing the duties of DOD's comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. We are also very proud to represent our warriors and their families. And today, as they do every day, they're keeping our country safe. They're defending our homeland. They're standing up to Communist China. They're working hand in glove with our allies and partners. They are achieving peace through strength. I'd like to start by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. That includes an additional 10% raise for our junior enlisted service members E1 to E4. Thank you for supporting our initiatives that improve quality of life for our warriors and their families. Things that include making historic investments. This budget makes historic investments in living conditions, in barracks, in base housing. This budget reforms the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moves for families. We've already seen changes there. And we improve the quality of care provided by our defense healthcare system. The best part of my job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. We hear their concerns. We know what it's like to face these challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback that we've gotten from the force. We are listening, and we are always looking for ways to improve quality of life for those who serve. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961.6 billion budget request, more than $1 trillion for national security, will end 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military. Now, as is custom with first-year administration budget releases, additional time was necessary to implement presidential initiatives. So in the last 4 months, we've moved quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. We found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department. And this savings, if you add this savings to our overall budget, we're increasing the DOD budget in 2026 by $143 billion. We do that by killing wasteful programs, targeting bureaucratic excess, and redirecting funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. We're working with the Department of Homeland Security to increase border security, to reduce China's malign influence in the Western Hemisphere, to defend freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, as we would all acknowledge, there's more work to do. I've got 3 core priorities in the department: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we're restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump has charged me to focus relentlessly on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness, and that is exactly what we're doing. We're setting standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach, and the force is responding incredibly. Because of President Trump and his America First priorities, recruitment and retention are higher than they've been in decades. Historic surge of young Americans who want to join our military. Second, we're rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged, yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump is correcting that. We're reviving our defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process, rapidly fielding emerging technologies and new weapons to meet the challenges of the future. This budget invests $25 billion in Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces as we face rising nuclear dangers. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first 6th-generation air superiority fighter. The budget will revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26, and that's on top of $47 billion overall for shipbuilding. The budget significantly increases funds to buy next-generation technology, including autonomous systems, long-range drones, long-range fires, and hypersonics. We will put these capabilities in the hands of our warfighters, ensuring we remain the most lethal force in the world for generations to come. And third, we're reestablishing deterrence. When an opponent sees our well-equipped and tough-as-nails warriors, they will decide that today is not the day to test U.S. resolve. Credible deterrence, it starts at home, and it starts with securing our borders. As was mentioned by the chairman, we are working to achieve 100% operational control of the border. Illegal crossings have decreased 99.9%, and it was just reported today that CBP released 0 illegals into the U.S. last month, down from 62,000 released into the interior last May. The Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and China is our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled twice to that region to visit our forces and meet with our allies and partners. As we shift toward the Indo-Pacific, we're looking more to our allies and partners to be force multipliers alongside the United States, and we're making progress in that. We applaud those allies who are stepping up, but others need to do more and quickly. At the NATO Heads of State meeting next week, we expect NATO allies to commit to spending 5% of GDP on defense and defense-related investment, an almost inconceivable accomplishment when President Trump started that project in his first term. And with NATO stepping up, we now have a new standard for allied defense spending that all of our allies around the world, including in Asia, should move to. As the President has rightly pointed out, it's only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We cannot want their security more than they do. The Department of Defense is executing a common-sense agenda to achieve peace through strength. We know the threats we face are serious, and so our investments are as well. And that's what this budget does. It matches capabilities to threats. We long for peace, so we prepare for war. We must overcome decades of neglect and decline. We must fortify our position as the world's most lethal fighting force, and we have to act fast because our opponents are. This committee is our critical partner. We appreciate your leadership and oversight, which is essential. And I look forward to accomplishing these goals to achieve peace through strength, support our warriors, protect our citizens and our taxpayers together with you. May God grant us the wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. General Caine, do you wish to summarize your testimony?
Yes, sir.
You are
Good morning.
recognized for 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'll try to hit that target. Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Reed, members of the committee, thank you for being here. I'm honored to join Secretary Hegseth and Ms. Bryn McDonnell to appear before you today to testify on the President's fiscal year 26 budget. Today's hearing reflects our shared commitment to maximize efficiency, accountability of our taxpayers' dollars, and ensuring every expenditure increases the lethality and survivability of your joint force, providing our warfighters with the advanced capabilities and cutting-edge technology required to dominate our adversaries. I have deep gratitude for everyone in this room and our shared commitment to help deliver the capability and capacity that the joint force needs. That goes to our civilians and their families as we work to deliver peace through overwhelming strength. And I want to echo the Secretary's comments regarding our brave men and women serving abroad today. It's my responsibility as chairman to understand, advise, and integrate our joint force to confront and manage the risks worldwide. This demands a comprehensive understanding of every domain, across every service, and across every region, across all time horizons. It also requires making and advocating for difficult decisions that prioritize the finite taxpayer resources that we have in order to ensure the greatest impact and capability for our warfighters. The President's budget enables the joint force to defend our great nation from adversaries seeking to do us harm. And we're relentless in the pursuit of innovation and technologies that allows us to hopefully deter, but if need be, win on battlefields of the future. This budget empowers the joint force to get after the Secretary's 3 pillars: restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing deterrence, and ensures that the joint force is properly armed, globally integrated, and ready to go. The President's budget invests in our warfighting capabilities to win, as I said, on the battlefields of the future. We must be properly armed with the right capabilities, lethal, modern, reliable, survivable, and at scale in order to win. Victory requires people and platforms that overmatch the enemy's systems and work under the harshest conditions to ensure our decisive edge. This budget gives the necessary tools to reinvigorate our national and defense industrial base. Our nation is full of incredible talent, and we need to unlock every bit of it. This budget also helps us become more globally integrated, which is one of my main jobs. We are in the Joint Force relationship entrepreneurs, working together with the military, but also with our allies and partners, the interagency, and industry to make sure that we're connected before crisis or conflict. And this budget helps us to integrate that combat capability as our commanders and leaders consider actions and activities, not at the point that we're in a crisis somewhere. Finally, the President's budget reflects our mandate to stay ready, always on the account, anticipating the next fight and making sure that everyone is ready to go. But the most important component is our people. The budget makes meaningful investments in our service members and their families, improving quality of life for housing, medical care, and the ever-important moving process. As our most precious asset, we have to deliver for our people. I want to highlight one of them today. Sitting behind me is Colonel Matt Jamont. Many folks know Matt up on the Hill today. It's probably his last hearing in uniform, which after 31 years, he graduates from service later this year. He's been like a pterodactyl for the Joint Force, always delivering and advocating for it.
Pterodactyls are very, very old.
Yes, sir, I know. You'll note his,
Would
he
you
looks
raise
very,
your hand,
very
Colonel?
young. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
It's an honor every day to serve alongside some of the extraordinary warriors and civilian teammates that our nation has to offer. I assure this committee that the Joint Force remains committed and capable, and we're grateful for your continued support. I want to also highlight the leaders that will come before this committee in the coming days, which will be carefully considered by each of you for the general and flag officer assignments. They are all extraordinary. I am mindful and grateful for those that are currently deployed right now. They are on my mind and in my heart, and I know the secretaries as well. And I continue to hold a special remembrance for our fallen and the families of our fallen who show us what right looks like. Thank you for your time, and with that, I look forward to your questions.
Very skillful use of time, General. And Ms. McDonnell, we will not require an opening statement from you. Thank you for your for being available for questions today. And now we move to rounds of 5-minute questions. And let me say, we expect full attendance today, and I expect all members will want to ask questions. I've tried to be very skillful sometimes in my membership on this committee to ask a very involved question with about 20 seconds to go in my 5 minutes. We will not be using that practice today. Or we'll be here in the wee hours of the early evening. So at this point, let me begin by asking Secretary Hegseth about congressional intent. We worry about the explicit choices that the Congress has made and that have been enacted into law by the President in the fiscal year 2026 budget. The decision came to us surprisingly to zero out destroyers, even though Congress intended for reconciliation to give the industrial base stability with a third DDG in fiscal years 2027 and in 2029. I've asked this of every nominee from the department who has come before us about honoring congressional intent. We will put funds in the reconciliation bill, working with the House and working with the administration to get the signature on the bill. And we will make clear alongside that the specific congressional intent. I've asked this of every official, and I will ask you as well, Mr. Secretary, do you commit to following congressional intent unequivocally on reconciliation?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Yes, our team looks forward to working with this committee, both through the budget process and reconciliation, and would acknowledge, just as a starting point of the conversation, that we are looking at 2 bills and 1 budget at the Defense Department. So as we have discussions about allocation, we may sometimes be talking about different numbers because of that, but from our perspective, we built a budget tied to $960 billion.
Are you qualifying your explicit yes? Because we have not had that from any of the other witnesses that have come before us. If our congressional intent alongside the numbers in reconciliation is explicitly expressed, do you commit to following congressional intent unequivocally in reconciliation?
Yes, we just wanted to clarify the entirety of the budget from our perspective.
Well, thank you very much. Now, you said once before that, and I quoted in my opening statement, Mr. Secretary, that going below 3% of GDP would be very dangerous. That was your testimony in January. Of course, you know well that we're asking our allies in Europe and NATO to go to 5%, and it has been the intention of most of us on the committee that the United States lead by example and, in fact, follow the peace through strength example of President Reagan and his administration in getting to 5%. I understand that if you put reconciliation and the budget requests together for this year, it exceeds 3%. But if we go back to that same baseline for the next 3 years after that, we'll be under 3%. We intend to fix that. But do you still agree that going below 3% would be a, quote, very dangerous, unquote, choice?
Yes, sir, and so does the President of the United States, which is why this budget increases from FY25 13%, puts us at 3.5% of GDP on defense, and we feel like is a generational increase in defense capabilities. And when you add that alongside the $30 billion we've already found in savings and repurposed, that's where I get to the $143 billion in additional spending in defense, which we think is substantial.
And you agree then, Mr. Secretary, that in future years, it would be very dangerous to go below that 3%?
As I said in my remarks, we're going to match our budget to threats. And so, yes, in the future, we anticipate threats like we have today. And so I would anticipate a robust budget in the future. Yes.
Would you please be kind enough to answer my question? Would going below 3% in future fiscal years be, quote, very dangerous, unquote, as you said in your statement in January?
Yes, sir, and I believe the President of the United States definitely feels the same way.
Thank you, sir. Senator Reid.
Thank you very much.
And I yield back 5 seconds.
I'll take those 5 seconds.
Oh, no, sir. No, that's not the way it works.
First, let me apologize to Miss MacDonald, who I said was Miss McDougal. You're Irish, right?
My husband is, yes, sir.
Well, that's good enough. Thank you. You were Scotch for a few minutes, but I apologize, ma'am. And, Mr. Secretary, you have fired a number of general and flag officers, and you clearly have the authority to do that, but there was no cause given, and it's also deeply concerning. It's taking a long time to appoint successors. I understand that today you announced that the nominee for CNO will be Admiral Darrell Caudle. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Well, we still have many of these positions open, including the U.S. Cyber Command, which is absolutely critical. Do you believe that these lack of nominated leaders are affecting our warfighting abilities?
Sir, I believe we all serve at the pleasure of the president. And in every single position, we're looking for the right man or woman to fill that role to execute on behalf of the missions of this department. And we're doing it expeditiously in every case.
Again, do you have any anticipation of when we'll receive the nominee for Cyber Command?
Sir, as I mentioned before, we have a very capable deputy at Cyber Command who has taken the helm. So it's not as if it's without leadership, very much so. But we are, as recently as yesterday, had a high-level discussion of exactly what that will be.
Mr. Secretary, in your opening statement, you stated, at the Department of Defense, we are sweeping away distraction to focus on our core mission of warfighting. However, since your confirmation, your office has been consumed by high turnover and disarray. At least 3 senior aides were fired and subsequently investigated for leaks, alleged leaks to the press. Your first chief of staff has since left his position, and to the best of my knowledge, that position is vacant. The Inspector General is reviewing your use of Signal app to send sensitive information pertaining to military operations in Yemen, not only to senior government officials, but to your wife, your brother, and your personal lawyer. Finally, according to press reports, you have threatened polygraph tests against senior members of the military. As I said in my opening statement, this is a dangerous world. You know that. And this turmoil in your own office is not contributing, I think, to the clarity and thoughtfulness and decisiveness necessary.
Sir, I would just say the media loves sensational headlines that are not connected at all to reality. If you look at the execution of our office and what we've done on the president's priorities, I'm very proud of what we've been able to do in 140 days. And when you move fast to reestablish deterrence and restore a warrior ethos and rebuild the military, it's going to come with some changes. But when you look at the leadership structure, both in uniform and on the civilian side of the Defense Department, it's as strong and capable as it's ever been. And I would contrast it with the chaos of the world under the previous administration. The debacle in Afghanistan, war unleashed in Ukraine, what happened on October 7th, that was a view of weakness and chaos unleashed by the Biden administration under the previous defense secretary. So if a few changes have to be made in the first portion of my term in order to get it right, I think that's pretty acceptable to establish deterrence and rebuild our military and restore the warrior ethos.
Well, Mr. Secretary, you can cite those examples. History, I might have a different perspective. As I understand it, the direction to leave Afghanistan was an agreement with President Trump in Doha, which left our forces in a very precarious position since they were there for a year and they had to come out. And Taliban knew that, and they were going after them. But let me move on to another issue, which is
30 seconds.
35. We have had detainees in Guantanamo, and we have used military flights to get them there. The problem, I think, is that some of these military flights have not contained DHS agents on it. And so, in effect, the military becomes not just the custodial agents, they're also the control agents. And that would seem to me a violation of military procedures. Is that practice continuing?
Senator, every aspect of that mission is in coordination with DHS and with DHS officials.
So there are no flights with airmen only on board?
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary General, Ms. MacDonnell, welcome. I serve on both the Armed Services and the Appropriations Committees, and every year we legislate annual authorization and appropriation bills that provide the policies and the funding for the department. While I'm confident we will do so again this year, the administration has made this process more difficult by delaying the delivery of budget materials to Congress. Mr. Secretary and General Caine, I've appreciated our previous discussions about the need to modernize our nuclear triad and to provide the President with additional options for regional nuclear deterrence. And to achieve this, we must have sustained and predictable funding within the Department's base budget. I'm concerned that the Department's fiscal year 26 request relies too heavily on reconciliation for some of our nuclear programs. For example, the reconciliation text includes funding for Sentinel. That is meant to accelerate and reduce risk in the program over the next several years. It is not meant to fill a self-imposed gap in funding in a single fiscal year created by short-changing ICBMs in the base budget. I understand using reconciliation funding is relatively new to the Department, but I expect us to work together throughout this cycle so that we can assure that funds are used as intended and that the programs are adequately funded within that base budget. General Caine, do you agree that nuclear modernization programs should be prioritized both to keep pace with the threats and to ensure that the President has a full array of options for nuclear deterrence?
I do, Senator, and appreciate your leadership on ensuring that we've got the tools that we need to deliver for the triad of the future.
Secretary Hegseth, although progress has been made the last several years, I continue to be concerned about the ability of our defense industrial base to produce munitions at an adequate scale to support our warfighters in these modern conflicts that we have. And now that you have been sworn in and had time to review the current state of our industrial base, what more should the Department be doing to increase munitions production, and how does this budget request support these objectives?
Senator, it's a great question. We should be doing everything we can, which is precisely what we are doing at the very highest levels, from myself to the Deputy Secretary of Defense with industry. This budget is a 45% increase in the defense industrial base. It invests in critical munitions procurement. It invests in defense supply chains, in resilience in supply chains, in increased competition and capabilities for outside companies to get into the business of providing critical munitions. So across the board, we're finding and hiring innovators to move as quickly as possible, cutting through the bureaucracy, the red tape to deliver those systems in a world that needs them now more than ever.
Could you get back to me on timelines that you have set for each of those areas that you mentioned, and obviously the funding that's going towards them, but I'd be interested in what you're setting for yourself for goals for the timelines in getting that achieved.
Yes, ma'am, we have those and we will get those to you.
Thank you. And General Caine, do you assess that the total munitions requirement is currently aligned with the magnitude of the threats that this country faces, or should the Department review its stockpile requirements to ensure that we are fully prepared for these modern conflicts?
Senator, we're always looking at the lessons learned of past conflicts to include the most recent ones around the world and taking those and applying those to what the future of war might look like. So we're always evolving and considering what the mix of munitions that we need for the joint force in order to deliver overwhelming strength.
And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up spectrum. So as we look towards the Golden Dome and the importance of that, over the next several weeks, I hope we can see some more details on that because we can't shoot what we don't see. And I think it's important that all of us here, as well as the public, understand the importance of the spectrum that the Department has in order to reach that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fisher, for that important and correct observation. Senator Shaheen.
Thank you all very much for being here. News reports this morning suggest that the President is actively considering intervening in the situation in the Middle East. I understand that we have 40,000 troops deployed in the region, many of whom are in range of Iranian missiles. And it's being reported that the president is being asked to consider providing the bunker buster bomb that is required to be carried only by the B-2 bomber and would require a U.S. pilot. That raises real concerns about what retaliation might mean for the safety and stability of the entire region and our troops and Americans who are in the region. So can you tell us, Mr. Secretary, are you considering military action that would bring us into active hostilities? And whether you expect a decision to be made on that anytime in the next few days?
Just bearing in mind, and you can stop the clock, we will be going into a classified portion of the hearing later on. But proceed, Mr. Secretary.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman, but I think this is a question that's very important for the American public to hear.
I just wanted to make it clear that there would be an opportunity to get very deep into that. Go ahead.
Senator, I agree with the chairman. Most of what I can or should say would be reserved for a classified setting. I would say the president, obviously, any decisions on this matter are at the presidential level. He has communicated very clearly for quite some time.
I do understand that, Mr. Secretary, but my question for you is whether you have been asked actively to provide options for the president regarding a strike in the Middle East.
If I had or I had not, I wouldn't disclose that in this forum, Senator. My job, our job, Chairman and I, at all times is to make sure the president has options and is informed of what those options might be and what the ramifications of those options might be.
I appreciate that.
You mentioned the troops in the region. With maximum force protection at all times is being maintained.
I would hope that as soon as consideration about action is determined, that the public will be informed about that. 6 of us on this committee just returned from the largest air show in the world. It was very impressive to see the innovation and technology from our industry on aerospace. And one of the concerns that I heard from many of the companies that I talked to was about the potential to partner with our allies and partners for innovation, for co-production. And one concern I heard was about the proposed review of the AUKUS agreement. That's after the Australian government has already contributed $500 million to our submarine industrial base, and American and UK shipbuilders have made capital investments to support the increased demand. So do you disagree with the position that President Trump has taken about AUKUS, that we should move forward? And what is the review expected to produce?
Well, Senator, I think reviews are always prudent, but those reviews actually come after conversations I've had with the Minister of Defense, Healy, in the UK and Marles in Australia. Long personal conversations about the status of this arrangement, both aspects of it. So we are reviewing it because that's what the Defense Department ought to do to make sure it fits the priorities of the president and that our defense and shipbuilding industrial base can support, ensure that we're clear on all sides of that, on either pillar. And then on pillar 2, identifying specifically the ways we can work together most meaningfully to co-produce with our industrial base munitions or other capabilities that would be most applicable to the threats we face.
But do you agree that it's important to increase the capability of our nuclear deterrent in the Indo-Pacific, and that AUKUS is one way to do that?
I do, and working through AUKUS as a possible avenue for that is a good thing.
Last week, Mr. Secretary, during the SAC-D appropriations hearing, you reaffirmed the need for an exemption for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard to your hiring freeze. Senator Collins asked you a very relevant question on that, and since Senator King and I share that shipyard, I'd like to ask you again, because we have not yet heard anything from you or from the Office of Personnel Management about how they're responding to this. DOD has told us that the Office of Personnel Management needs to review every single new hire one by one at a time when we need 550 people every year just to keep up with the Navy's demand for maintenance and on its nuclear submarines. So will you commit to talking to OPM on this issue? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Cotton.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your testimony, and more importantly, your service. Secretary Hegseth, the President at a press gaggle just now at the White House said of strikes against Iran, to Senator Shaheen's question, I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. You had referred to these questions as a presidential level decision, is that right? And I think that's always true. Advisors advise and presidents decide. But it's your job to have contingency plans for everything that the president may or may not decide. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And no one should be surprised or scandalized that the Pentagon has lots and lots of contingency plans.
Senator, our job is to have contingency plans.
It's like in Armageddon, Billy Bob Thornton's character Truman, speaking of NASA, could have been speaking of the Pentagon. You're geniuses. You're just thinking stuff up, and you got people in another room backing them up. Is that right?
We plan.
Thank you. And although it's true in every part of the government, it's probably no more true in your department that it's a presidential level decision. This is the president's core constitutional responsibilities as the commander-in-chief. I mean, it's important what he does with labor and HUD and the rest, but as the commander-in-chief, it's the most important role he has, and therefore you're the department where you take the most direct guidance from the president. Everyone in the department has to support the president's decisions once those decisions are made, correct?
Correct, Senator. As I've said, there's only one person that was elected president of the United States.
Yeah.
And the American people elected him to make these decisions on their behalf. And if and when those decisions are made, the department is prepared to execute.
And I know that you welcome and have robust policy debates in the department, and no doubt you have very differing views on many questions, whether it's what to do with Iran or what kind of aircraft or ships we need to build or what the quality of commissaries are on our bases, and that's welcome. You need that kind of robust debate to make the right recommendations. But once the president's decision has been made on any question, that's final, right? That's your standard?
The president welcomes, I've watched it in real time, views on all issues from all aspects. But yes, once those have been represented, intelligence represented, options represented, upsides, downsides, threats, of course, when the president makes a call as the commander-in-chief, we will execute.
Well, thank you, because I know there was some controversy earlier this year inside the department, and not everyone seemed to be on the same page that you and the president are after presidential decisions had been made, and you had to make some tough decisions there. And I commend you for those decisions. I think you did the right thing. You have to make sure that everyone stays on the same page and everyone supports presidential decisions. One decision I also want to call out, since we haven't spoken about it here, and I'm not sure we will, and I want to commend you for as well and commend your team, is the redesignation of base names for Army bases. In the summer of 2020, as a Jacobin fever swept the country during the BLM riots, it was decided to rename several Army bases. To be honest with you, I think most soldiers serving those bases didn't even know who they were named after. They just had fond recollections for decades of their time at Fort Benning or Fort Bragg or other places. And I think now you've completed the effort to redesignate those names, those bases, to the names that so many generations of soldiers served at for new American heroes. Is that right?
Yes, all of the previous names for the U.S. Army installations have been returned.
Well, thank you. I think that was an inspired approach. It complies with the law. It teaches a new generation of soldiers about those who went before them, and I hope the matter is settled. I especially want to commend you for Fort Gordon, named after Gary Gordon, one of two Delta operators along with Randy Shugart, who willingly laid down their life in the Battle of Mogadishu to protect their buddies, not even in the battle at the time, and against commanders' repeated wishes until they pestered the commanders finally to let them get on the ground and protect those soldiers on the ground and lay down their life. I think that was an inspired choice. One final question. You'd said that everything needs to be on the table to address our munitions crisis. We all agree on this committee. We all have been working hard for many years on that. Private industry is very important, but you have your own organic industrial base. Ammunition plants, arsenals, depots, that's included in everything, right? That we need to look at every possible source to address every potential choke point in our munition supply chain.
Every possible source.
Thank you. General Caine, you agree with that, I presume, that our organic industrial base, especially the arsenals and ammunition plants and depots, are a solution to this problem, not a part of the problem or a relic of the past?
I do, sir, and I'm aware of your letter to the Army on that matter, which I know they're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Senator Cotton. Senator Gillibrand.
Secretary Hegseth, this committee has had many hearings about the future of warfare and making sure that we have the complement of warfighters that we need to win any future wars and not focus on how we could have done better in the previous war. One of the areas where I have deep concern is cyber defense in this country. I'm concerned about cyber warfare. I'm concerned about cyber terrorism. I'm also concerned about the deployment of UAS, as we've seen being extremely powerful in the war in Ukraine. We've seen what Iran has done. So I'm concerned about our posture with regard to UAS and a defensive posture with regard to UAS attacks. I am very concerned about what happened over many of our military sites. Drone configurations hovering for weeks without response. No authorities to be able to track where those drones came from by the DOD to assess, are they Iranian, are they Chinese, are they Russian, are they on spy missions, what is their purpose? Inadequate authorities, inadequate defenses, inadequate technology. The Langley incursion is incomprehensible. On top of that, I'm very concerned that we are not investing in our cyber professionals, that we don't have enough cyber offense, enough cyber defense. We have currently 30,000 open cyber positions within the DOD. So I'd like to hear from you, what's your plan to have cyber defense and cyber warriors at the appropriate complement? And number two, what is your plan to create the authorities that you need for UAS defense and to have the inadequate response of this is someone else's job no longer come out of our leaders?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. You're right over the target. Cyber needs to be a part of every single way that we plan and look at the world. That gray zone part of conflict, and we can't cede that terrain in any way to our adversaries. And so it is, you'll see the resources in this budget that invest in that. You'll see it fully integrated into planning and capabilities. And what we're looking for in the next cybercom and what we're looking for there, our Deputy Secretary of Defense is leading a charge to make sure it fits precisely what the world needs today.
So we have a program that this committee supported in the last two NDAAs, which is a cyber academy to create a pipeline of young people who do cyber for service. So they get a state-of-the-art cyber education at over 600 schools around the country, and then they dedicate the number of years they had education to the Department of Defense or the intelligence community. And right now it is not being funded. And right now, because of the hiring freeze, these kids who have completed their degree under the Cyber Service Academy actually can't get a job at the DOD or the intelligence community, and they're either going to have to no longer serve, which was part of the program, or get employed somewhere else, but we lose them. So what are you doing to unplug this problem of not hiring these cyber professionals immediately because they are part of the cyber service program? And your budget does not show that you are planning to fill 100 cyber positions for these young people who want to serve in the IC community or in the IC or in the Department of Defense.
We'll review that aspect of the hiring freeze in the Cyber Academy. We want those positions filled. We're fully committed to it. And then on counter UAS, which you mentioned, it is a reality of the modern battlefield, whether it's in Ukraine or elsewhere, that we have to fully account for and address as aggressively as possible. And you have my assurances at the highest levels. we are putting our best people in charge of ensuring we have counter-UAS systems that can match the threats of the future.
I would like you to prepare for this committee 2 letters in response to these questions. 1, what are you going to do to fill the 1,000 slots for the Cyber Academy? And how are you going to get this hiring freeze taken care of? And 2, what is your plan for increased authorities, increased investment, appropriate review of UAS that hover over our military and nuclear sites? So this committee has a fulsome response from your whole team about how you will address these 2 problems.
We will get that to you, Senator, and authorities, you are right, is a huge issue on counter-UAS
It's something
that we're going to
Senator
address.
Cotton and I are committed to passing. We both serve on intelligence and armed services, and so we share the urgency on this issue.
And so, Mr. Secretary, you'll submit those letters for the record. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To all of you, first of all, thank you for your service to our country. I have heard now from 25 senior department officials, including every service chief and 8 combatant commanders, that vacating the 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz and the 7 to 8 gigahertz bands of the spectrum would have significantly negative consequences for our warfighting capabilities. Being forced to share these bands with commercial interests in a non-optimal way would have the same impact. General Caine, does the Joint Force have capabilities operating on the 3.1 to 3.45 band and the 7 to 8 bands of the spectrum, which would be used in a conflict with China?
We do, Senator, yes.
And would those capabilities be negatively impacted if the Department of Defense were forced to share those bands with commercial users in a non-optimal manner?
Sure, Senator, I think the key is non-optimal. I know there's some work going on around dynamic sharing that would minimize to an acceptable level the ability to frequency hop in and out of those particular bands that would not adversely impact the Joint Force. So,
but as of today, there is no way to make it happen.
Not today, as you know, Senator, and I appreciate your leadership on this, but there's a lot of work going on in that space, sir.
I think we agree that the economic security is national security and that we need to move forward in the next gen with regard to our communications capabilities. But as it pertains to spectrum auction authority, how do you view a spectrum auction process that bases decisions solely on economic considerations?
Well, as you said, Senator, economic security is national security. You know, those are policy decisions. My job as the chairman is to provide the military advice to our policymakers and let them make that decision. And this firmly sits in that policy space. And so rather than put myself sideways out of my swim lane, I'll leave it to them to decide.
But in your professional military opinion, the areas between 3.1 to 3.45 and the 7 to 8 band are critical to our national defense.
3.1 to 3.45, no doubt. Lower end of the 7, there's some discussion. 7.4 to 8.4 is an area that I'd prefer us to hang on to, Mr.
Thank
Senator.
you. And Secretary Hegseth, I know that you've told me that you would be willing to go to the mat to protect these critical capabilities. I think that is critical. In fact, these bands are essential to building Golden Dome, which will require even more radars and military communications infrastructure than we currently have, particularly around population centers and defense sites, as we see in Israel today. Would you agree with that today, sir?
Yes, Senator, I concur with the chairman's characterization, and I would just say at no time in conversations around spectrum has DOD's equity never been, it's always been fully represented in those conversations to ensure we protect what we need to protect.
Thank you. General Caine, what is your assessment of the operational and strategic benefits of maintaining the dual hat leadership arrangement between U.S. Cyber Command and National Security Agency, the NSA, particularly in terms of intelligence integration, speed of action, and mission success in contested environments?
Sir, I can argue both sides of that one, and you know, mindful that that's a policy discussion. I think that either will go on soon or has been going on, and I'd prefer to leave that to the policymakers. I think the key is both organizations are critically important, and whether it's a single commander or two leaders that collaborate with no distance between them, we achieve the same end state.
Would it be fair to say that the dual hat prevents stovepipes in the cyber domain today?
Senator, there's stovepipes in all kinds of domains today, so I can't assure you that it would prevent them. What I do hope is that whatever path we take, we select leaders who are committed to integrating and knocking down those stovepipes, whether it's a single leader or two leaders. That's what the nation needs.
We have been successful in making significant exchanges and utilizing assets for both the NSA and for Cyber Command so far. Secretary Hegseth, are you committed to maintaining the dual hat relationship that has significantly benefited our national security to date?
Senator, as of right now, we're maintaining the status quo, but it's something we reserve the right to review.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rounds. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, you've been asked about options for the use of force abroad. I want to ask about the use of our military at home. I have been deeply disturbed and alarmed by the use of active duty troops, Marines, in Los Angeles, and President Trump has made clear his intention to continue to use the military to suppress dissent and likely inflame tensions there and elsewhere, all under the guise of enforcing the law. What he's doing may well be illegal. I want to ask you about contingency plans for the use of active duty military in other cities. Do you have such contingency plans?
Senator, I would just say we share the president's view that, as you characterized it, we are deeply disturbed and alarmed that ICE officers are being attacked while doing their job in any city in America. And so allowing National Guard or active troops under existing authorities to defend them is
attacks
important.
on ICE officers, yes, but we ought to be equally alarmed by the illegal use of active duty Marines or other military. I take it from your answer that you do have contingency plans for the use of military in other cities.
We have never and will not illegally deploy troops. All have been under existing
But you
and
do have
well-established
such plans.
authorities
I
to
find
use
that
troops
answer
to support
deeply
federal law
alarming.
enforcement officers.
So far, there's been no legal justification. It's been challenged successfully. I think that it will prevail. Those challenges will prevail in the courts. And I want to ask you right now to submit to this panel those contingency plans for the use of active duty military in other cities. I want to move on to another area of questioning. The chairman has said that you've submitted precious little detail, to quote him, precious little detail about the budget. I think there is no detail. This budget is literally a rough outline with short-sighted shortfalls. For example, the shortfall on the Columbia class, $2 billion. Only about $1 billion for Virginia class. There is virtually no outline or specificity as to how you are going to provide drones to defend and also engage in offensive outline and maneuvers. The nature of warfare is changing right before our eyes in real time. Unmanned aerial and undersea warfare is happening in Ukraine and elsewhere, and I think that you owe this committee and the American public more specificity in that budget, because we will be at risk. We are at risk right now in the Middle East, and I want to know whether we have contingency plans to protect our U.S. personnel in the region from the kind of swarm of drones that have proved devastating already to 3 of our service people in the Middle East on a base in Jordan. Do you have such plans to protect against drones there?
Senator, we work hand in glove with the Joint Staff and CENTCOM and every COCOM especially right now, to ensure everything at our disposal is available to ensure maximum force protection against any contingency, including the one you described, sir.
Well, I have no assurance that we have the capacity to safeguard against the swarm of small, lightweight, slow-moving drones that are, in my view, our major vulnerability. And right now, if we engage in the Iran conflict, would put us and U.S. personnel at risk there. Let me ask you about Ukraine. I've just returned from my 7th trip to Ukraine. I am the advocate, chief sponsor with Senator Graham in the Russia sanctions bill. You said that the United States and the ranking member cited it, that we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective and will only prolong the war. My question to you is, when will you release the PDA $4 billion in equipment that Ukraine desperately needs? It's sitting there. Ukraine deserves it. When will it be released?
We're aware of PDA 75, and that is a decision we can make in the future.
My time has expired, but I don't consider that answer adequate.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Chairman, for being here. Ms. MacDonnell, I'm actually going to have a question for you. So thank you very much for being here. And I know that Iran is on our minds right now. And Secretary, I'll just pose a very quick question to you. October 7th, 2023, Hamas attacked Israel. Who is the primary funder of Hamas?
Senator, it is Iran.
And who is the primary sponsor then that provides them with the weapons that they use to attack Israel?
Same answer, ma'am.
And maybe our public is not aware, but 43 Americans lost their lives on October 7th at the hands of Hamas, which is an Iran-backed terrorist organization. 43 Americans. We never talk about it, folks. I heard nothing about this in the Biden administration. So when there is question about whether it's appropriate for America to be engaged in the Middle East in defending Americans that live and work abroad, I think there's our answer. So thank you, Secretary. I'll start with the Secretary, then I'll come to you, Ms. MacDonnell. Secretary Hegseth, I do want to thank you because we've had many discussions about this. You have appointed Steve Erickson as the Executive Director of Force Resiliency, and he will oversee the Department's Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, what we know as SAPRO. And he will directly report to you on the issue of sexual assault within our military. And you've been very responsive on this issue, and I commend you for that. And I have already received my first briefing by Mr. Erickson. So to continue building on this progress, I'm going to hold quarterly meetings with the SAPRO, and we want to make sure that we continue the momentum that we are seeing within the department on that. And Secretary Hegseth, from your vantage point, what positive trends are you seeing out of SAPRO?
Well, first of all, Senator, I want to thank you and other members of this committee for the work you've done on that issue. And I think in large part, and you'll see this in this budget, we continue to fund the programs which have seen efficacy. And so I think a lot of these were newer programs, new initiatives, new emphasis put in place that we have simply sought to maintain and accelerate. And you see that in this budget. And thankfully, we've seen this year sexual assault numbers decrease. One is too many, as we've said before, but a decrease is a good trend to see. We want to continue that.
Wonderful. And we'll continue working with the department on that. And an amendment that I am going to propose for this year's NDAA would require quarterly briefings from the SAPRO for members of Congress, just as they do with suicide prevention. So we'll continue working on that. I also would love to touch upon a number of other issues I've worked as far when it comes to fiscal sanity within the department. I can submit those for the record because I do want to give Ms. MacDonnell an opportunity. Let's talk about an audit. I love working with the comptrollers out there, but GAO released a report warning that the Department of Defense is unlikely to achieve a clean audit by 2028, citing longstanding financial management weaknesses. And it's my understanding that a key issue in the department's continued reliance on outdated business and feeder systems that lack internal controls continues to contribute to that. So to help address that, in the reconciliation package, we have $350 million that will be dedicated and directed toward improving audit outcomes across the department. So, Ms. MacDonnell, all to you. Can you walk us through how the department intends to meet its statutory requirement of achieving that clean audit by 2028?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and thank you for your support in reconciliation for automation, AI, and business system replacement to achieve the audit. The first day we came in, that was one of the first topics the Secretary and I discussed, and he actually just put out a memo with guidance for milestones each fiscal year that the department is going to achieve the financial audit by 2028 or sooner, as he has challenged us to do. The Marine Corps just passed their second clean audit opinion. 2 additional components have done the same recently. And within the next 3 years, under the Secretary's guidance, the remainder of the department will achieve the clean audit opinion.
Well, outstanding. We really appreciate that. Thank you, everyone, for your service to our great nation.
Thank you very much, Senator Ernst. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, you've had a tough start. At your confirmation hearing, my Democratic colleagues and I rightly questioned whether you had the requisite qualifications and experience to lead the DOD, the largest federal agency, especially given your checkered past, which included paying $50,000 in hush money to settle a sexual assault allegation against you and driving 2 veterans organizations into the ground. After only months on the job, our concerns about you have proven true, as far as I'm concerned. Instead of strengthening national security, you've turned the Pentagon into a dysfunctional mess. You are jeopardizing military operations and service members' lives with your unprecedented action of texting classified military plans to anyone who might stroke your ego. Leading the Department of Defense is more than just a PR campaign filled with photo ops. While you pose for cameras, Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine continues unabated. Israel and Iran are also at war, in large part because your boss tore up a multilateral agreement former President Obama brokered with the UK, France, Germany, China, and Russia that curbed Iran's nuclear program and ambitions. Meanwhile, China advances in the Pacific as this regime undermines and attacks our allies. At a time when steady leadership is critical, we are confronted with crisis and instability. Mr. Secretary, close to 5,000 Marines and National Guards have been deployed to LA without the request or consent of the California governor or the Los Angeles mayor, Bass. Rather than calming the situation, this troop deployment is purposefully inflaming and escalates tensions. You claim lethality is your top priority. Do you plan to unleash this lethal force against U.S. citizens and civilians in LA and other cities?
Well, Senator, I would reject most of the characterization of that statement, including lethality against U.S. cities, when all of those National Guardsmen and Marines have conducted themselves with the
5,000
utmost of professionalism, defending our federal agents, Americans,
Well,
who
we
deserve to be able to
obviously
do their job
have
to
a
deport
different
illegal immigrants
view.
after the previous administration allowed
Reclaiming my
21
time.
million
I am
illegals
not
to
here to
cross our
listen
border.
to rhetorical responses. I would like to have a professional response that I would expect from somebody who is the Secretary of Defense. Millions of people peacefully demonstrated this weekend against the president acting like a king. Given this regime's dangerous policy of mobilizing troops inside the U.S., the politicizing of the military is a legitimate concern. So, given the dangerous policy of mobilizing troops inside the U.S., if ordered by the president, I'm going to ask you once again, to shoot peaceful protesters in the legs, would you carry out such an order from the president?
Senator, as I've said before, of course, I reject the premise of your question and the characterization that I would be given or are given unlawful
Considering-
orders. It's all meant
Excuse
to
me.
attempt to smear the commander-in-chief, and I won't
Considering
fall
that the
for it.
president in his first term actually ordered such a thing, it is not a premise that you can reject. He can order, do the same thing. So you're, again, I think you would just follow what the president wants you to do. Let's face it, it is not normal to call up our troops in this way, and there is active litigation against this deployment. Will you follow a court's order regarding whether or not this deployment is legal? If the court says this deployment of troops into our cities is not legal, would you follow that court's order?